This is the Love Truth Leadership Podcast. Your hosts Larry Chatterley and Nick Johnson welcome you on your journey of self-improvement and connection. Listen as they combine their different experiences of life to help you learn leadership is not just a title, but the profound expression of the love and truth you bring into the world. Hi, I'm Nick.
I'm Larry.
And welcome back to the LTL show, everybody. We have our first guest, which we're really excited about. Sam Piccolotti is going to join us. We're going to talk about discipline with Sam, and he's a very disciplined man. But first, before we get into our subject, I wanted to fix a few things that I talked about, or reiterate a few things. I told you about Bob Proctor's quote, working with you can't have service and work be combined, and that was a line that was divided. And it turns out I'm completely wrong about that, because I re-listened to that quote that Bob Proctor said, and it was, as long as you combine your work with your purpose, that equals your service. And so that being said, purpose is a big deal, and that's going to be definitely something that we're going to talk about in later episodes. If you can, find a purpose in everything that you do, then your work becomes your purpose, and you can actually provide service with your work, which makes it enjoyable. And, from there you can grow rich. That's the other thing I wanted to cover, because rich isn't necessarily monetary. It's rich of heart, rich of mind, rich of health, rich in gratitude, right, Larry? Yeah. You can be very rich in gratitude. And one of those things where we live in a society where being rich or wealthy is considered only monetary. And we need to really understand that being rich can be many things, rich in health and all that kind of stuff. It's one of those things where you can be wealthy in many aspects in your life and still be a happy person without the money. Additionally, I had messed up and forgot who Hill was tasked by whenever he was told to write the Think and Grow Rich book. And he was actually tasked by Andrew Carnegie. Now, there is some controversy behind that. If you guys would want to understand that, a little bit of controversy, you can just check out Wikipedia and type in Napoleon Hill, and that'll give you all the information. I was actually very surprised whenever it came down to that. And then our last episode, we covered trauma. And I wanted to touch on one thing that I found very interesting and I forgot to talk about. Jordan Peterson interviewed a Dr. James Penbaker. He was a psychology professor at Texas University. I can't remember which one. And he researched people who had traumatic experiences in their lives and really didn't talk about their traumatic experiences with anyone. And he found that people with traumatic experiences were more likely to get sick as well. So this is another good reason why, getting your trauma and not making it something that you carry around and something that you make sure you're comfortable with and that doesn't dictate your life. Because in this study, he got a group of 50 students who he knew had a traumatic experience in life and that they never talked about it. He had 25 journal about something superficial, and he had 25 journal about their trauma specifically. And they journaled for 15 minutes a day for 4 days a week. And that went on for, I think it was 60 days, he said. The students who wrote about the trauma went to the health center at the college half the rate over 3 to 6 months. And then so they did another study with a similar, group of students, a few years later. And then they decided by a flip of the coin who was going to actually journal about trauma and who was going to journal about just something superficial. And then 6 weeks later, they drew the blood of all the students and found the ones who wrote about trauma had an enhanced immune function. So your body, your brain, what you think and what you carry around with you has an immediate effect on your health. So I thought that was super interesting. And take with that what you will, but if you find that you're sick all the time, you might want to do some internal looking and see what you're carrying around with you. And they basically, what that came down to is that you're basically doing what's called self-therapy whenever you're journaling about your trauma. And that's actually almost a stronger form of going to a therapist, because you're actually coming to problems that affect you and getting them out yourself and not reliving them, where a lot of the times in therapy, they just end up reliving that past over and over again and trying to coach you how to get over it. And then the next session is like, okay, how do you feel again? Well, I feel like I'm still living in my trauma. And so from there, that's, where we'll lead in and introduce Sam. How you doing this morning, Sam?
Great. I appreciate you guys inviting me to join you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming, man. That's really awesome. Sam is a customer of mine at the bike shop. And,
yes, sir.
And that's why I love my job so much, because I get to meet all these really awesome, healthy people like Sam and Larry. And every time, once a week, I see somebody that comes in and I'm like, all right, I'm going to contact you. Like I want to talk to you and see what your life's about and what do you do to maintain your health. And
yeah, think about how much more advantageous you are having people come in to a bike shop to visit you versus a dentist.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, that's very true. That is very true, and that's why I'm so grateful for my job, my day in and day out job, and it actually that I've been thinking about it and to touch on that whole purpose thing. My job brings me a lot of purpose, and that's really awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Sam?
Sure. I'm born and raised in the Northeast, but had lifelong ambition to live in the Rocky Mountains. And it took me 40 years to get here. But
you're here now. Yeah.
Made a number of attempts in and around my college years, and shortly thereafter to try to find a job out here and move, but job and career and family kept me busy back east. And in 2001, I made a very conscious decision in my professional life to make a change.
Yeah. And
I started a business that I had aspired to move west, and just funny change of circumstance. I ended up getting a job offer out here in the midst of working to transition to business.
Yeah.
And weighed the both and thought, well, I'll do both. I'll leave the business with my partner for now, and I'll go take the job and get myself set up. And it didn't work out, but I ended up, being able to realize my ambition to live in the Rocky Mountains, and it's just been fantastic. So, in my personal life, I spend a lot of my time in the fitness world, either coaching and participating in a myriad of activities in different genres of sport. That's really where I find my passion, and that it's become my medicine. And time with family.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
So what did you used to do then before you back out east? What was your career then?
I was in banking. I had a really good run, about 15 years in retail and commercial banking.
Okay.
I was an executive leader for a big major financial institution back east. It was a great experience. I was on a fast track with a lot of promotions, but I felt fairly empty, after a decade or so in those roles, and realized that, I'd ended up in a place it wasn't necessarily by choice.
Yeah.
And I was searching for more fulfillment.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd left that, that industry and took an opportunity to move west. And I'm still somewhat related in my professional life to the banking industry. I serve into it now, but I'm not working in it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So your primary focus now is what? Coaching, fitness, what?
Primary focus? Really, it's it's on trying to be the best human that I can be today, and fulfilling different aspects of my life. I want to be a good parent. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good member of the community. And in my professional life, I'm always striving for achievement and success in that role. But I've found a work-life balance here in the West that I was missing back East. I think a lot of that's cultural.
Yeah.
In the Northeast, you're fairly judged by what your career or vocation is, and very little attention. I mean, it's just not recreationally driven, the community and the culture. And I always personally struggled with that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see my personal identity as what I was doing, vocationally, but that's how the rest of the community perceived me.
Yeah.
And that was fine because I was succeeding in those roles, but there was a sense of emptiness there.
Yeah.
And I've definitely found that balance here.
Good. And you've talked to me a little bit about before, like how, because you're big on doing triathlons, and then you trying to balance that living out East with your career, and how that was very difficult for you and stuff to do. And
I had I'd gotten into triathlon by accident. I grew up a swimmer and an asthmatic, so anything that had to do with running was a complete challenge for me. It could have been gym class.
Yeah.
And I might end up being benched, just because anything that had to do with running, I just never knew if I was going to have a day, where I could withstand, the activity or not. And there wasn't much medication for it then. So swimming became my sport at the age of 8. I swam all through high school, and I was a good swimmer. I did not swim in college. I had offers to do that, but I wanted to get out and do other things. But I came back from college one summer, and my cousin, who was a former junior pro cyclist, was part of a triathlon relay team. And he had some, local standout runner that he had on his team. And, he had a course record in this triathlon on the bike, and they were looking for a good swimmer and asked me if I'd do the event. And I said, well, I haven't been swimming, but how far is the swim? And they're like, a mile. And I was like, oh, okay, well,
no big deal.
I can bang out a mile. Yeah. So I got in the pool a couple times and practiced a little bit and thought, 20, 25 minutes and I'll be done. No big deal. It didn't turn out that way. In the world of triathlon, in the race, traditionally you start off with a swim. And so I never even met the runner because he was at a different transition area. And I showed up in the morning for the swim and, completely confident, but unprepared, and went off with the rest of the group in the scrum and figured I'd be able to bang out that mile pretty successfully. And I got just a couple 100 meters into the swim and I started having an asthma attack.
Oh, damn.
And I realized I was in trouble. And I continued to try to just, mentally just get to the next buoy, just see if you can work through it, get to the next buoy. But there was no working through it. And I didn't even get a half mile into the swim. And I had to, call out to a boat, a safety boat that was there. And they pulled me out and, rushed me off to an ambulance and put me on oxygen. And I was just humiliated.
Oh yeah, I mean,
just
I bet that's
totally humiliated
that
that I wasn't able to pull it off. That I let these other two people down in that process. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, I thought, well, if this is what's hard, the swimming, biking, and running, I'm going to do a whole bunch of it and see if I can overcome the asthma.
Yeah.
And so I started training for triathlon. I did my first triathlon the next spring and was just totally hooked on the excitement. It was just a sprint triathlon up in upstate New York. And I went up with my younger brother, and he waited along for me. But I came through the event with such a level of newfound excitement and exhilaration that that kind of became my thing for about 36 years, I guess.
Heck yeah, I mean, I think about swimming a mile and instantly I'm like, whoa, like a whole mile of swimming. Like, yeah, I'll walk it, try to jog it, but bike it for sure. But swimming that thing, man, geez Louise, that's some work. Yeah, I couldn't even, and then thinking about it so confidently, like, oh yeah, 25 minutes, no big deal. Swimming a mile,
well, you see, even kids today, they're, in their teenage years swimming and club swimming. And, I think we were averaging 3 to 4 miles a day in practice, some days twice a day.
Wow.
In high school, you'd have morning practice and afternoon practice. So the mile didn't seem, that was a warm up, generally. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I hear you. Yeah. If you're not from that world, swimming's a tough sport. People, I don't think realize how difficult, because there's a lot of, it's, even though you're part of a team, it's all individual effort.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You have any questions for Sam about his history or anything, Larry? Or?
No, I liked his answer when I asked about what he does, what he focuses on. And what I like is that when you usually ask people what they do, it's their occupation. So I always find that interesting. And it's like what you said back east. People define you by what you work.
Yeah.
Not who you are.
Yeah.
And what I liked what he said is he defined more about who he was. And it's about balance his life with family and everything else. And that's really where it's at. It's in those values that you esteem. And even though he really loves to be fit, he also, and works out, he also tries to balance that with other things in your life.
Yeah.
Is that how I take that, Sam? Right?
And that, it's been a real struggle. Not anymore. I'll be honest, but it was in the beginning. And you had asked, Nick, when and how I was balancing that in the beginning, and when in and around that late 90 period when I was really enjoying triathlon, I was still participating with Monday night rides and Wednesday night bike rides, and And there was a social component to that. It was a lot of fun. You'd go out and you'd ride and you have a couple beers and a pizza afterwards or something. And I would get my workouts, my swims in, during the day, and I'd always strength trained. I'd incorporate those things. But as my family grew, in 2001, we had our second child, and I was in a very demanding role at the bank, and finding it really difficult to find time to train. So I wasn't making the Monday night rides. I wasn't making the Wednesday night rides. And I'd show up on Saturday when we'd have a swim, bike, run session out at the lake. And, then I'd go compete, over the season. And I was starting to get my butt kicked. And it was really frustrating for me to manage and cope with, because I, just like cycling, it's time in that sport. You just have to put the time in. And I just wasn't getting all that time in. But I also had a mentality back then that if I didn't have 2 hours for a bike ride, it wasn't worth getting on the bike.
Yeah.
And that summer, my wife's niece was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and which was something that really inspired me. Just the thought of being able to, escape for several months and take a 2,000-mile trek in the wilderness, and find yourself. And I read a book that year called Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. Now, there was a movie made after it as well. I think Nick Nolte and might have been Robert Redford, actually. And and after reading the book, I was so inspired by that concept. And when my wife's niece Kelly was coming through Pennsylvania, her mom was going to have a backyard party to greet her and any other trail mates that had been there. And I wanted to make certain to be able to get over there and just talk to these people and pick their brains and find out, what it was like to be out there in the wilderness for a couple of months. But I was also, a little myth and critical, not in a negative way, but from my account, just by reading the book, and I was no expert, it seemed like they were 30 days behind schedule, meaning that if they were to continue on from Pennsylvania to Maine, that they were going to be hiking in winter weather conditions. And that changes the whole dynamic.
Oh, yeah.
These through hikers usually want to be finished before the snow flies. And so I was curious, for these folks that were still kind of lagging behind, do you really think you're going to make it? Because you're that far behind. And I don't want to put that in a critical sense, but I was curious. And I had asked a few of them, and they had shared their journey, and it was really interesting because everybody there had a story. They all had a reason for being out there, discovering either, their why or their purpose, or trying to deal with trauma that they had had. It was really very interesting.
Yeah.
And for Kelly, it was just an ambitious attempt. She had just graduated college. She was a Division I athlete. Yeah. It was like a way to celebrate and go do something big before you go off to work, right? But I had asked her, I said, Kelly, do you think you're going to make it to Katahdin before the snow flies? And she said to me, I don't know. We had a lot of 0 days, meaning days where they just didn't hike. They just sat around. And I thought, well, how could you do that when you have such a big task ahead of you and you're just hanging around one day and you've got all these miles, ahead of you. And then I started thinking about my own excuses that I was making for lack of time to be able to train, that if I didn't have 2 hours, it wasn't worth getting on the bike. If I, couldn't devote a full day on Saturday because I had to go to one of my child's events or something, that it wouldn't be worth it to just spend 30 minutes working out. And I thought, okay, that's it. From now on, no 0 days. I'm going to do something every day, regardless of how much time I have. And that was August of 2001.
Heck yeah. So, and then you, that's a great transition, because I was going to ask you about your no 0 days. And then is this, I did a little bit of research on it. It's not something that, it's something that there is out there on the internet, but you really embody this. You're launching a product line, of which you've already done, and then you were tasked with, you tasked yourself with writing books about it too, I believe.
I'm working on a book.
Yeah. Which is really, really cool. And so, you did that awesome. I don't even have to ask you about no 0 days now, really. Well, but it's...
it's just a personal ethos for the longest time. I kept it to myself. It wasn't anything that I thought to share with anyone. It was just my way of coping with, the mental struggle of, and the negative self-talk that comes out of in defeat of, discussions you have with yourself about deficits, right? Like deficit in time, deficit in ability to do the things you want. And it was a way for me to cope with that and just change my perspective and say, stop making excuses.
Yeah.
You have time. You can get something done. But the other thing, that it did for me at that time is it took me out of that roller coaster of mental anguish of feeling like I'm in shape or I'm out of shape. And I could just check the box if I did something that day and say, Sam, it's okay. Like, you got your run in, or you got your walk in, or you did some push-ups today. And I stopped beating myself up mentally for not achieving some other kind of, objective or perception that I had of where I needed to be from a fitness level. So it allowed me to cope and manage and balance.
And I want to let our audience know something as well. No 0 days doesn't mean like exercise per se, like 100% of the time. It can be, I don't miss a day where I don't meditate, or I don't miss a day where I don't journal my gratitude, and that kind of stuff as well, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because people have asked me, like, 20 years, you haven't missed a day, like, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't missed a day. And, well, you had to have gotten sick, or you've had to, and I've had injuries, and I've been hospitalized, and I can remember just back in 2014, I had, emergency surgery, and I came out of emergency surgery, And after, the surgeon had explained to me where my limitations were, what I had gone through, my first thought was, okay, well, how am I going to work out now? And I asked if I could walk, and they said, yeah. So I grabbed my IV, and I just, as much as they would allow me, I just walked the perimeter of the hospital floor, and it was enough to just get me to relax, to allow me to know that, hey, you're still in it. It's okay. And coming out of that, I was, kind of relegated to bed rest for a while, and I couldn't lift over 8 pounds. So I did exactly what you just mentioned. I started meditating and doing breathing exercises and trying to pick up, new knowledge on breathing.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of ways to contribute to yourself on a daily basis. And that's really what it was about for me, was just giving myself that time and place of appreciation to focus on my well-being.
Yeah, 100%. And it's well-being isn't necessarily always physical. I mean, a lot of it is. And a lot of exercise can be, exercise is great for releasing your endorphins and then, just keeping the mind straight and all that stuff. But like Sam just said, he was brought down by an injury, that made him focus a little bit more of how to be, improve his well-being continuously as well, which was really awesome.
It's interesting. Sam had an epiphany, if that's the right word, after reading that book, right?
Yeah.
And interesting in life, it seems like we hit challenges or hard times, and then all of a sudden we go, whoa, what am I doing here? We start questioning.
Yeah.
And then about what we're doing, and we rethink it, and we go, man, maybe there is something more to this. And maybe I should be doing something different. And taking responsibility for our emotions and our physical health and our spiritual health. And sometimes that's the impetus. And in your case, it was the no zero. I'm going to do something, even if it's 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Do something, right?
Yeah.
To self-improve. And as you improve yourself, that also enhances your capacity to help others, right?
100%. And, Larry, you made me think back to, my early 20s. I was fortunate. I had my grandmother, and we talked about this before the show. She was very spiritually centered and faith centered, but she also, was very inspirational. And when I went away to college, she handed me Napoleon Hill's book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And she had this other book that she would carry around. She made sure to get me a copy of his Thought Conditioners. So I'd always been aware and had that influence. I didn't necessarily adopt it, as a teen or even in my early 20s. But I found myself in and around 1986 in emotionally in a very dark place. Our family had suffered, a lot of setbacks, and my dad had lost his business. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and then there was a divorce, and I was the oldest of 5 kids, and there was just a lot of strife and strain.
A weight on your shoulders too.
And I dropped out of college to come home to help raise my younger siblings, and at that time I felt like my life had just totally fallen apart. I had lost the vision and ambition that I had kind of had for myself, going off to college and thinking about a future and a life, and struggled with balancing that and the obligation that I felt to be there for my siblings. And I had, gotten myself in a relationship that had really inspired me, and I was, really enamored with this girl, and that ended up failing, and I went into a very depressed and dark state for a period of time, and had a very difficult time. I couldn't get myself out of my bedroom, and I got to a place where I'd contemplated not staying in this world anymore, and at that point I realized, kind of to your point about epiphany, I had a realization that there were people around me that I cared about, and they cared about me, and that I just couldn't let go. I had to find a way to cope. And I started picking up old cassette tapes that were laying around with Dr. Wayne Dyer, who you're
yeah.
probably familiar with, and some other motivational stuff, and exactly what you had said about, or it was you, Nick, about the endorphins. I was listening to one of these tapes, and they were talking about how exercise, evokes certain release of hormones and feel-good hormones like endorphins stuff. And I thought, man, you got to get to the gym. Like you got to get out of this room and go work out. So the fitness thing for me in my early 20s became, my tool, for coping. And you had mentioned earlier about that, the NCD thing is not necessarily just physical thing, and well-being is not just physical. But what I've learned, or at least has, become, a reality for me, is that I believe that we all know the power of the mind, right?
Oh yeah.
The mind is a very powerful tool, and it can have positive and negative impacts on your body. Like
100%. Yeah.
But I also found personally that the body can help lead the mind.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No joke.
If you have a practice and you have a ritual of exercising and taking care of yourself, it breeds better thoughts, and I think it strengthens the mind.
Because you're like, okay, I'm doing this for myself. I'm going to go exercise and put myself into this, better state to release all these hormones and everything that are going to really help me keep my mind on track, and then wake up again and do it. So it's like they're balancing together, right? Your mind and body are working together, and then through the actual physical action of making yourself do it, you're just reinforcing these positive habits, and then really training your brain at the same time as training your body.
Yeah, I think there's a real yin-yang effect too.
Oh yeah. And that's where we'll bring into our subject for today is discipline. So discipline's something I've struggled with my whole life. It's I recently have found it. I feel like I've waking up in the morning now at a regular time, and first thing I do is my journaling, and the exercise I get in, but it's more of like I'll go ride my bike on Sunday, which I feel like to combine it with Savers, I really need to get in more of that exercise, which I do have the ambition to do and the plan to do. But right now I'm trying to launch this thing and being disciplined with my podcast. So it's finding that balance is going to be hard for me for right now, but it's something that I'm definitely focused on. And like Larry likes to say, Nick, 10 minutes, dude. That's all you need to do is 10 minutes of push-ups, sit-ups, 10 minutes. So I've been tackling that and working on that and getting over, I would say where my lack of motivation for discipline comes in is my high school experience, or I should say with exercise is my high school experience. And even before then, junior high, dressing up for PE. You guys would be surprised, but I was a very fat kid, 5'10" and weighed like 210 pounds.
Wow.
And so
and for the folks listening,
I'm 6'5" and weigh 188 right now. So yeah. And so that is, but I still have, and this is something that I feel like I really need to focus on tackling now that I'm here and I'm on this journey, is I have that fat kid trauma, I feel like, from my high school. The kid who is always made fun of, oh, you can't even do one push up. And I grew up in a school where it was very small, and if you weren't on the football team, the baseball team, basketball team, you were
you didn't count.
You didn't count, right? Yeah. And you were the punching bag and all that kind of stuff. So that's something that I feel like a lot of our audience probably can relate with. And so it's one of those things where this is going to be, for me, my next tackle is facing this background that I have with exercise, because I wouldn't be like, I've had gym memberships, but every time I've gone to the gym, this anxiety comes in, and I don't go in until like, 11 o'clock, when hopefully there's no one there, just because I have that whole, like, everybody's looking at me, I'm getting judged kind of thing. And I feel like a lot of people really feel that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So that's something that you guys, as our audience is listening, you're gonna get to go on this journey with me. I'm gonna figure out how to combat that. But let's get back into the subject of discipline, Sam. How do you stay disciplined, and what does discipline mean for you?
I think first of all, let me just comment.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned exercise being as a deficit for you right now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I just want to challenge your thought process because
go ahead. I'm up for that. Yeah.
If you were doing nothing else and you were living with deficits and just sitting on deficits, then maybe you'd have some reason to to feel defeated. But you're in a progressive mode.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So, take the wins.
Oh, I am. Right? I am taking the wins. I know where I'm at
the
in
rest
comparison.
Will
Yeah.
come. You got to start there.
Oh, yeah.
You're moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
Discipline, I think it comes from two places, and it can be negatively reinforced or catalyzed through punishment, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can have a discipline or a ritual or obey certain practices or routines because you're forced into them. And that can be a driver for discipline or self-discipline, or it can come from a place of inspiration or motivation. But I think that requires first the desire and the willingness to change.
Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about self-mastery there.
Yeah.
So if you're not forced into a discipline or a routine because, there are negative consequences that you're facing, and we've all seen evidence of that, but you're looking to adapt a discipline for positive reasons, it has to come from a place where you have a desire to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first step, and I think what you guys are trying to present here speaks to that. It's, how do you get to that place, right? How do you find that motivation to take that first step?
Right.
And for some people that might just be lacing up your shoes and walking out the door.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah.
I heard you give reference to walking in a gym, the intimidation, but I can tell you from experience because I've got a discipline myself of constantly challenging myself to do things that make me uncomfortable. And I know from my personal experience, at least, that if I get too comfortable, then that's when that inhibition starts to creep into my life.
Yeah.
And I leave room for things like intimidation. But I will physically and mentally and emotionally try to find things on a regular basis that make me uncomfortable and work to try to complete those tasks.
Yeah.
And on an emotional level, maybe it's just, okay, I want to finish this book. It's just, the act of reading this or finishing a book, or maybe it's showing more patience, administering more patience and listening to a family member, somebody that, might be complaining or in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Or, it might be throwing a rock or a log on my shoulder and forcing myself to go out to do a 5-mile hike,
Yeah, actually,
whatever it is, but I think it comes from, first, that willingness for change. And then you don't have to take the big steps. I think that's where people fall down so often is, they look at going to the gym and they start to project right away all of the things that stand in front of them. Well, I don't look like those people. I don't have the right clothes. I don't have the right shoes. I haven't been here for forever. And,
Yeah.
I don't understand the exercises. You just got to eliminate that stuff and break it down to small steps.
So I would like to talk about the atomic habits real quick, because you had brought up discipline being from maybe more of a motivation from like a negative aspect, sometimes. And I like what James Clear, right, Larry? Yeah, how he said you can also find discipline through reward too. I'm not going to look at my phone until I've gotten up and brushed my teeth and drank my water and did my morning routine. And then looking at the phone is the dopamine reward. So you're changing your whole outlook on stuff. And to be able to do that, you have to have that discipline. Looking at the phone is going to be my reward for doing my morning routine. And so that's another way that you might be able to bring a little bit more discipline and habit change in your life, is say, okay, I'm going to, instead of doing what I would normally do because my brain is totally addicted to that because of the dopamine response I get from it, I'm going to interrupt that whole thing. And then whenever I'm done interrupting it with my new healthy pattern, I can reward myself. And then your brain starts to associate that whole system, that new system that you're doing, with receiving a reward. So that's another way to look at.
I'd like to make a comment here, Nick. What I did in 1988, I knew I lacked self-discipline, to get up, and I knew I felt like I needed to go running. So I found a guy named John, and John used to be running. He says, okay, I'm going to be there at 6 a.m. at your door. So I knew he's coming, and he knows that I'm expecting him. And so I looked at an action partner.
Yeah.
So in some cases, for years, I had to have an action partner. It kept me accountable to someone else to get up. And so I ran for 30 years. I was a runner, I would say, by trade. I switched to cycling because after being scoped 5 times on the knees, the orthopedic surgeon says, well, Larry, I can keep taking your money. You keep running, I'll keep taking your money, or you might want to rethink this. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And he was a runner.
Yeah.
So,
well, he gets it. Yeah.
He got it. He says, yeah, you might want to mix. So that's what introduced triathlons. I was trying to mix something up. He said, you're doing way too much running. Yeah. And so then after the action partner, I started competing, not because I wanted to do well. It was a goal. So when I'd set a goal, if I was going to go do a triathlon, I got to get ready. So every time I would say I'm going to get ready for a race, it'd give me. So like this last year, I was cycling the Tour de France route. If you're familiar with that, that's a tough route.
Yeah, awesome.
And so I went to a guy who coaches people, and he says, okay, here's your regimen. Here's what you got to do every day.
Yeah.
Larry, if you're going to make this thing through. And I wished I'd kind of doubled that.
Yeah.
If you know much about, it's pretty
tough.
It's
what an awesome adventure.
It's climbing Everest 3 times, in elevation gain.
Wow.
Yeah. And then how many thousands?
It was about 175,000 miles of elevation gain in 21 day cycling.
Wow.
That's a lot of cycling.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How old are you, Larry? So
I'll be 71 next month. So
71.
Right 70.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for real.
That's very cool.
So it was I would call it a BHAG. People don't know what that means. It's an acronym from Good to Great by Jim Collins, an author out of Boulder. And a BHAG stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you do.
Yeah.
Big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
And so I like that. It challenged me. It's something I'd had challenges before, but this one was. And then the year before that was the Pacific Coast Highway. Cycling that. The year before that was
beautiful.
The Great Divide, if you're familiar with that cycling route. And then the year before that was Route 66. But anyway.
That's what you started with, right? Was Route 66?
Yeah, Route 60 cycling that from Chicago to LA.
That's the beauty of testing yourself in those ways that, it grows, right? Like for some people, it might just be, you're running your first 5K, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That could be as big and as audacious as, riding the Tour de France course. It just depends where you're starting from.
Yeah, my first was a 5K. And it about killed me. I got, what am I doing here? I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so I finished that. I thought, okay, I can do this. The next one was a 10K, and I could do that. And then someone finally challenged me, wait, what about a half? I don't know. That's a long way.
So another way to be disciplined is find a goal that you want to achieve, and then keep that make that your vision, and find your discipline in that, and find what it takes to okay, this is I have this goal that I want to do. I have a vision for myself now that I want to do, and I'm going to be disciplined in tackling that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam, I want to ask you about gratitude. What does gratitude mean to you?
Well, I really think it's the key to perception, and so many other things from a coping mechanism. If we're going through our day and we're putting all the weight on our shoulders of of accomplishment and or deficit, and we're not stopping to think about the things that we have as small or minute as they might be from a gratitude standpoint. I think we're falling short. But that takes discipline too.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Being able to especially when you're not feeling it, man.
No, not at all. Yeah,
when you're not in a good place and you're down, it's really hard to uncover those things to be grateful for, and that exercise can be really exhausting, if you're not mentally up for it. For me, I find, I have a lot to be grateful for. I feel very blessed for many things in my life, but I still have to go out every now and then and put a discipline in place to make sure I'm realizing gratitude.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to find yourself in a place of self-pity at times. And just a couple of years ago during the pandemic, I was in one of those places, right? I was just in a real funk and feeling, some sense of self-pity and couldn't figure out why I was there. And I opened up Facebook, and one of my friends, one of the girls in my No Zero Days group was battling cancer, and I saw a post where she went out for a run, and I thought, oh, Sam, you're such a pussy. Like, you're sitting here, feeling sorry for yourself, and look what she's dealing with.
Yeah.
So that was motivation for me to do something that day, and I have this. I know you're going to ask about it. I have this log that I found in the field behind my house. They'd cut down this old cottonwood tree, and I dragged that thing home one day and peeled the bark off it and thought, I'm going to do something with this thing. Like, maybe I'll make a bench out of it or do something. And that morning I got up and I thought about that log sitting in my garage, and I thought, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that log and just put in a little bit of suffering today and work this self-pity out of my brain and devote this workout to her.
Okay.
And so I took it over to the incline and started hucking the incline with it.
How much does it weigh?
65 pounds.
Okay, cool. Right. Yeah, but still walk with a 65-pound log up a hill, man.
You're doing your own Spartan race. Yeah. Isn't that what they do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I've done this with other things, like with rocks. I've got a yard full of rocks that I end up carrying around and bringing home. But matter of fact, at the base of the incline, there's 3 of them sitting there that I've placed. But that day it was just slap in the face to get my act together and hold on to some gratitude that day and the blessings that I had at that moment. And it's interesting because that log, I'd started taking that log out. On hikes, and I would take it over to Ridgeline here and do the red loop with it and stuff. And one day I was over there, not feeling real sociable and kind of into my own head space, and I was out with the dog, and I was carrying that log, and I'd come up on a guy who was sitting on a bench, a log bench there, and I had my earbuds in, which I don't make a practice of carrying technology. Like, I'll carry my phone, but I don't try to listen to stuff. I want to be out in the open and be aware when I'm working out in the suffering and listen to myself breathe and whatever. But I noticed his posture. He was just kind of bent over, sitting on a log, and I didn't really want to socialize, but I thought, just be friendly, just say hello.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't even in the mood to say hello.
Yeah.
And so I was walking by, my dog went over to greet him, and I came by, and there's just something about his physical posture that day. And I stopped and I said, hey, how you doing? I said, okay. And he's kind of slumped over, and I said, do you mind if I set my log down here for a minute? And no, sure. And I put the log down, and he said, so what's with the log? And I said, well, I'm just carrying it around for extra resistance, which, is only half the truth.
Yeah.
And he said, so what's with the name on the log? And I had written her name on the log. I was dedicating that workout to her. And I said, well, I had a friend that was going through a rough time, and I thought, I would dedicate my workout to her. So I put her name on a log. And he said, would you mind putting my name on that log?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so right away I introduced myself, and I sat down and I said, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he'd explained to me, and it's a beautiful spot there, and I know you know it well.
Yeah.
It overlooks the western slope,
Yeah.
and you can see 100 miles of mountain range. And I said, what's going on? And he said, just a really tough day for me. He said, and he tapped the bench, and he said, I put this bench here in honor of my son who had passed away. And I said, man, I'm really sorry. And I had been on that log 100 times. I do push-ups on it. So I'd never realized there's a plaque there with his name on it, his son's name.
Oh.
And there's a quote from a song, a country song. And anyway, we got to talking, and he shared with me how his son had passed. They'd hiked 14ers together, but his son just oddly enough out just on a training hike, and it fell off, not a 14er, just some local mountain, and fell to his death and hit his head and passed at a young age. And anyway, I think it's the song title or something like go tell her on a mountain, not go tell her and go higher in a mountain, whatever it was. It's just the strangest occurrence, because I had gotten back to my car and I turned on Spotify and that song started to play.
Wow.
Serendipitous, man, for sure. Yeah.
And, I through gratitude.
Yeah.
You can open up a lot of awareness.
Oh, man. Yeah, that is no joke.
And if you are just caught up in all that self-pity and self-loathing, it just doesn't open you up to the things that are out there in the world or in the universe for you to receive.
And that's, a lot of, I really enjoy comparison, because it's like you said, in comparison to the woman that you had dedicated your exercise to, it's like, okay, well, she just went out and did this run with cancer. Yeah. And look what I'm doing. I'm just sitting here feeling mopey about my life. Like, what the heck, Yeah. And so you can always compare what you have going on to what somebody else has going on. And maybe they're, have something worse than you going on, and they're living in a state of still trying to fight and struggle and be better. And you can look, okay, I need to step up my gratitude. Or you can look and say, okay, I have maybe more than that person has, and what can I be grateful for there too? It's quite amazing that.
Well, they say,
thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
That's a really touching story.
Yeah, it really is.
I've had a number of those experiences, and back to your point, how to be aware, utilize gratitude. It's those things that are the reminders, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to have that space be open to receive those things. What's the expression, like if you sat down at a table with a group of your friends and everybody threw their problems, and their life out on the table, and you had a choice to pick up a card, you'd probably pick up your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you never really know what other people are dealing with until you've exposed. So, those moments, I think are really revealing. And for me, it becomes a discipline. If I'm feeling funky and I'm not in the mood, or I'm feeling, some self-pity, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I grab the log, or I go find something hard physically to put myself through, to break myself down mentally. I get to a place where, okay, you think you're uncomfortable. Let's go get uncomfortable and find out what you're really dealing with.
Okay.
And I always come home feeling better.
You're comfortable in discomfort, maybe.
It's true, because it has a way of breaking you down and shaking out the things that you think are, that are difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe that through some physical. So I've got an expression like, pay attention to pain, but embrace suffering.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because in suffering, there's always some growth. There's something to learn.
To learn. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Pain, you got to pay attention to. Larry, your doctor's telling you your knee's a problem. Eventually you got to pay attention, or you're not going to be using it. Right. But the suffering, not feeling good, or feeling tired, or feeling exhausted, or like you can't take one more step, or those kind of things. It's amazing the resilience that the body and the human brain have behind them. And when you get those breakthrough moments, that's where that revelation occurs. And for me, it works both from a mental resilience thing, but also from a sense of gratitude, because it like I said, it for me, it shakes out all that stuff that I think is difficult to deal with. And I start really getting down to what's difficult. And I realize, okay, you're all right.
Yeah.
You're in control, and you got a lot to be grateful for. But it's just that, the practice of awareness. I think it goes back to discipline that you had talked about before.
Yeah. For sure. So how would you suggest our audience start to build discipline in their lives then? How can I build discipline towards working out?
Well, I'll take it back to what I said about where discipline, what the catalyst for discipline is, right? And I don't think you need to go find somebody to beat you into the process and come to it from a negative perspective. I think it comes from, a little bit of self-mastery and choice.
That's fair.
And saying, look, I want to make change, whatever that change is.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of putting that in perspective and not getting ahead of yourself in that process. So, discipline, really speaks to a ritual, right? Or a routine.
Yeah.
And routines don't happen from one action.
No,
right? They happen from multiple actions.
Yeah, building that routine is like reinforcing a habit again.
Yeah, and keep it in perspective. You're not going to master it in the first day.
No, not at all.
So just if the change is okay, I need to get in shape. Well, let's eat it one bite at a time. Let's start today with something. Like I said, it doesn't take much, right?
Yeah.
Today you're going to lace your shoes up. You're going to walk to the corner. And maybe you're going to run to the corner. You're going to run to the corner back. Your goal might be to do that 5K. It might be a marathon. It might be something longer.
Yeah.
But bite into it and then do it again tomorrow.
So I've set a goal for myself to gain 30 pounds, which for me is going to be tough. But
well, then you need to get to the gym.
No, that's exactly. I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right, cool. This is in my vision for sure, and I like how Bob Proctor tells me, or not tells me, but I listen to him a lot.
Yeah.
And he has you have your A goals, your B goals, and your C goals, right? And so I'm trying to define, where my putting 30 pounds is either a B or a C goal. I don't pay attention to my A goals, which is like getting up and brushing my teeth and doing all that stuff. My B goals are going to be, what I do daily at work and that kind of stuff. My C goal is my vision. And so I think I'm going to have to put that.
Dude, break that down. Like 30 pounds is a lot. Like,
it's going to take years for me to do.
Right. The average male, if he puts 5 pounds of muscle on a year, is a lot. Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And if you break that down on what it's going to take to do that 5 pounds per year, or maybe get lucky and your body responds really well, it's 10 pounds per year. There's so much that goes into that, right? And it begins with it begins with, okay, well, I've got to start weight training. I've got
Oh,
to
yeah.
start strength training, and I've got to have my nutrition dialed in. So it's being able to accept the fact that there's got to be a lot of small steps and wins in the process and celebrating those.
Oh, yeah. The
along
1%,
the way,
right, Larry? Yeah. Yeah.
Baby steps, a little bit each time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Those wins.
Yeah, if you wake up every day and have the perspective is, man, I'm still not 30 pounds heavier. I still haven't put 30 pounds a month. There's no win there.
There's no win.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But if it's like, wow, I got to the gym today, I got through my strength session, and I just had 25 grams of protein for breakfast. Today's a good day.
Yeah.
Like I'm on my way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what I'm learning to do, especially since I've started this journey with Larry, is the whole shoot for me to get up on a regular basis like I am now and to, do all that kind of stuff. And just even writing my gratitude down every morning was a stretch from the person that I was before.
Is that journaling practice that you've recommended? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's really powerful. Yeah.
It's really powerful to journal a little bit every day. Like he said, they found journaling to be very effective in problem resolution and feeling gratitude. And what it does, it just changes the mind to rethink about yourself and others.
Yeah.
And as you rethink that, and that has a lot to do with what you just talked about, discipline and choice. I would say if I was having a struggle time to get up every morning, start journaling and find out, hey, maybe see what that is. What's going on here?
What, asking those questions?
Ask the questions. What's going on in my mind that's keeping me from getting up in the morning and performing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it gives you perspective and a point of reference, too.
Yeah.
Because you can look back at where you started and start to see the achievements. I was just watching a reel the other day, and David Goggins, who you guys may be acquainted with, he keeps a journal of all of his notebook, of all of his workouts every day.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah.
And those days when he wakes up and he's not feeling it, or he's feeling like he's not doing enough, picks up the book and he looks at, or books of detail of previous workouts. Like, hey, no, I'm on a path.
Yeah. Yeah. That's no joke. I mean, I was just, I would say I think it was last Sunday or the one before, I went and read like my first journal entry. Oh my God. My questions that I've asked myself are just like, from where I was, like, how can I get over this situation? I'm like, now, how can I bring more positive influence, and how can I increase my vision and all this kind of stuff, for myself. And just to see that over 2 months is just huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
That's a great practice or discipline and point of reference. I think so many people are lost in that because it gives you a way to go back and identify your wins.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah, and acknowledge the fact that you're actually moving forward with stuff in your life, which is huge. Yeah. And we're gonna get close to closing out. Any final thoughts that you guys might have on discipline? What about you, Larry?
Well, I would say now that we're thinking about choice and discipline, I would think, what's the difference between a disciplined person and undisciplined? And I would say a disciplined person does things that probably undisciplined people don't like to do. But the discipline, their dislikes of certain things are subordinated to their sense of purpose. Right?
Yeah.
If they have a strong sense of purpose, they have the commitment to follow through with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the thing I would say today, the message to our listeners, is they just need to make a decision, make a choice.
Yeah, and you kind of opened with that, that purpose piece, and how you're balancing and identifying purpose in your work and shaking out what purpose really means. And I think, not to get on a tangent, but so many of us, including myself at times, are really lost what that purpose is and how you identify that. But I think it gets easier to find through gratitude and employing some practices.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, Sam, thank you very much, my man. This has been
great to chat with you.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you,
real.
Sam. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm Nick.
I'm Larry.
And this is the LTL Show. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Love Truth Leadership Podcast, where leadership is not just a title, but the profound expression of the love and truth we bring into the world. What you can expect on next week's episode, Larry and I will be discussing purpose and meaning, what they mean, and how to find them both in your life. Larry and I greatly appreciate you, and thank you for listening.